Australia's political landscape has been through countless twists and turns, but few names cause as much stir as Tony Abbott. The year is 2025. The world has changed, new leaders have risen, and political priorities have shifted dramatically. But as headlines begin to resurface about Abbott's recent public appearances, interviews, and speeches, one question echoes through the media. White right-pointing backhand index, is Tony Abbott preparing for a comeback? The man who once held the highest office in Australia, as Prime Minister from 2013 to 2015, has remained one of the most talked about figures in the country's political and cultural landscape. Love him or criticize him, Tony Abbott represents a strong ideological force, conservative, outspoken, and deeply rooted in his vision of what Australia should be. Now, nearly a decade after stepping down from the leadership role, Abbott seems to be everywhere again, in public discussions, media interviews, and policy debates. Some say it's coincidence. Others believe it's strategy. Could the former Prime Minister truly be planning a return to frontline politics? Or is he simply influencing the direction of Australian conservatism from the sidelines? In this detailed analysis, we'll explore the facts, the theories, and the impact of this political shockwave. Welcome to Tony Abbott Returns, the shocking twist in Australian politics 2025 foot. Let's uncover what's really happening behind the headlines. Old footage of Abbott as PM, 2013 to 2015, 2025 news clips or headlines about Abbott return Parliament House, Australia flag, voters, political commentary shows camera zoom in on text, the comeback. Who is Tony Abbott now? Influence without office. To understand the current buzz, we need to look at who Tony Abbott is today, not just who he was when he led the country. Since leaving office in 2015, Abbott has never truly left the public eye. He may not sit in Parliament anymore, but he continues to shape Australia's political discourse in powerful ways. Over the past few years, Abbott has written thought-provoking essays and opinion columns, often challenging current immigration policies and national values, given numerous public speeches and lectures, emphasizing topics like Australian sovereignty, cultural identity, and border control, appeared on conservative media platforms, reinforcing his belief in traditional values and criticizing what he calls political drift in his former party, the Liberals. In early 2025, Abbott even published a new historical book titled Australia, A History, where he reinterprets the nation's story through his perspective. His book tour, interviews, and public appearances once again brought him into national focus, sparking speculation that these weren't just intellectual engagements, but part of a broader strategy. Even more telling, Abbott has become a key influencer inside the Liberal Party, especially among the right-wing faction. Many young conservatives see him as a mentor, a guiding figure in a time when the party is struggling to define its future. He regularly attends political think tank meetings, supports conservative candidates during pre-selections, and remains a frequent commentator on issues such as migration policy, family values, energy and environment debates, national security and defence. One cannot ignore that Abbott's commentary is strategic. He chooses topics that resonate deeply with traditional Australian voters, the same base that once gave him his strongest support. In other words, Tony Abbott may no longer have an official title, but his influence is unmistakably alive. This makes him a unique political figure, one who operates without office, but still commands attention as if he were in power. Clips or photos of Abbott speaking at public events, 2023 to 2025, screenshots of online news headlines about his interviews, footage of political conferences, rallies, and public discussions, map of Australia fading into images of political gatherings. The evidence. Speculation versus reality. So, what's the truth? Is Tony Abbott really planning a political comeback, or is this all just public imagination and media hype? To answer that, let's examine the evidence, and separate speculation from reality. 1. The public statements. Over the past year, Abbott has made several remarks that sparked interest. In multiple interviews, he said things like, "Politics is never off the table if the cause is right, and Australia still needs strong leadership rooted in conservative values." While he hasn't officially declared a return, such comments have fueled speculation, especially within political circles and conservative media. 2. The strategic visibility. Abbott's name has reappeared everywhere, news shows, book launches, panel discussions. This isn't random. In politics, timing and visibility often mean preparation. Political insiders say this could be his way of testing the waters, gauging public reaction before making a big move. 3. Party-level activity. According to several reports, Abbott has quietly attended private Liberal Party meetings and advised on upcoming candidate pre-selections. Sources within the party describe him as active behind the scenes, guiding Conservative candidates and influencing campaign messaging. 4. Grassroots response. In the public sphere, online forums, Conservative Facebook groups, and talk shows are buzzing with support for Abbott's comeback. Many older Liberal voters and regional communities express nostalgia for his leadership style: firm, direct, and unapologetically patriotic. 5. The counter-argument. On the flip side, there's no concrete proof that Abbott has filed or plans to file for any political seat. Many analysts believe his comeback would face major resistance within the Liberal Party's moderate faction, who see his views as outdated in today's more diverse Australia. So, the question remains, is Abbott laying the groundwork for a return to office, or simply positioning himself as a power broker, the man behind the message? At this stage, the line between speculation and reality remains blurred. But one thing is clear: Abbott's re-emergence has already shifted Australia's political conversation. Whether he runs or not, his influence has returned, and it's stronger than ever. Headlines like Abbott hints at political future. Split-screen debate footage of Abbott supporters versus critics. Parliament and election rallies. News anchors discussing Abbott's influence. To understand why talk of Tony Abbott's political return is gaining momentum, we need to look beyond headlines, into the deeper realities of Australia's Conservative movement in 2025. Politics, at its core, thrives on timing. And right now, the timing seems unusually favourable for a figure like Tony Abbott. After years of political turbulence, leadership changes, policy reversals, and economic uncertainty, the Australian right wing finds itself searching for a clear, confident voice. Within the Liberal Party, ideological fractures have widened. The moderates, who emphasise inclusivity and climate adaptation, often clash with traditional Conservatives, who prioritise economic freedom, border control, and cultural preservation. For the Conservatives, Tony Abbott embodies more than a former Prime Minister. He represents stability, authenticity, and conviction. The symbol of old-school conservatism, Abbott's brand of politics resonates deeply with Australians who feel alienated by rapid social and economic changes. They miss the clarity of his straightforward policies, his tough stance on immigration, his defence of traditional institutions, and his emphasis on national identity. In an age where many politicians are seen as cautious or overly polished, Abbott's blunt honesty, even when controversial, gives him a unique kind of credibility. Global momentum for Conservative revival. Abbott's potential return also fits within a global trend. Around the world, from Europe to the United States, right-wing populist movements are resurging. Political figures who once seemed finished are finding renewed relevance, capitalizing on economic anxieties, cultural debates, and distrust in establishment politics. Abbott's re-emergence could be part of that wave. His message, that Australia must stand firm on its values, echoes the rhetoric of these global movements, positioning him as both a national and international symbol of conservative resistance. The leadership vacuum inside the Liberal Party. Leadership uncertainty continues. After several short-term prime ministers and internal divisions, voters are weary of instability. Abbott's supporters argue that his experience, discipline, and confidence could offer a steady hand in uncertain times. For the party's right-wing base, he's not just a politician, he's a rallying point, a figure capable of reuniting a fractured conservative identity. Small blue diamond. Abbott's personal motivation. From Abbott's perspective, returning might not be about power, but purpose. Despite his controversies, Abbott has always believed his political mission was unfinished. In interviews, he has hinted at regret over policies left incomplete, particularly in areas like border protection, defence spending, and energy independence. As a man who views politics as public service, not celebrity, Abbott's motivation could come from a genuine sense of responsibility, to reassert his values before it's too late. Small blue diamond strategic opportunity. With rising cost of living pressures and growing disillusionment among Conservative voters, the Liberal Party faces the risk of losing its traditional base to smaller right-wing groups like One Nation or the United Australia Party. Abbott's return, even as a symbolic figure, could help recapture those votes, reuniting Conservatives under a single banner. In summary, Abbott's possible comeback is not just about nostalgia or ego. It's about timing, ideology, and opportunity. To Conservatives who feel left behind by modern politics, Tony Abbott represents more than a name from the past. He represents a potential future they can believe in. Liberal Party events showing mixed-age Conservative crowds. Abbott's past rallies or campaign scenes. Graphs showing party division between moderate and Conservative wings. Slow montage of rural Australia, workers, and flags, symbolising traditional voters. Global news clips showing Conservative figures rising in other countries. What stands in the way? Barriers to a full comeback. But if a return seems so tempting, why hasn't it happened yet? Because between the idea of a comeback and the reality of it lies a mountain of political and personal barriers. Tony Abbott may have the visibility, the support of a core base, and the experience, but he also faces steep resistance from within his own party, the media, and a changed Australian society. Let's break down these barriers. 1. Internal party resistance. The first and most immediate challenge lies inside the Liberal Party itself. While Abbott retains strong allies among the right wing, the party's current leadership leans more centrist, focused on attracting urban voters, women, and younger Australians. To many moderates, Abbott's style represents a step backward. They worry that his return could polarise the party, pushing swing voters toward Labor or independence. These moderates hold key positions in the party's decision-making machinery. Without their support, Abbott's official return to leadership would be extremely difficult. 2. Changing public perception. Australia in 2025 is not the same country Abbott governed in 2013. The nation has become more diverse, socially progressive, and environmentally conscious. Younger voters now dominate political discourse, especially on digital platforms, and they often view Abbott as part of an older political generation. His firm stances on immigration and climate policy, once seen as decisive, are now seen by some as outdated or divisive. Winning back the hearts of modern voters would require not just re-entry, but reinvention. 3. Media landscape and public scrutiny. The media environment has shifted dramatically. Social platforms drive narratives faster than ever before, and public memory is long. Every controversial statement or policy from Abbott's past, from climate skepticism to same-sex marriage opposition, would be resurrected and dissected. While Abbott has thick political skin, such a media storm could derail any attempt at a serious comeback before it begins. 4. Competition from emerging leaders. A new generation of Conservative politicians has already begun shaping their image as the modern right. Figures like Peter Dutton, Angus Taylor, and others hold stronger institutional connections and more media-friendly personas. Abbott would face not only external competition but internal rivalry, from those who admire him privately yet fear his dominance publicly. 5. The legacy dilemma. Another key obstacle is Abbott's own legacy. While he achieved notable policy wins, like repealing the carbon tax and implementing strict border control, his tenure also faced criticism for its tone and leadership style. Many within the party fear that his comeback would reopen old wounds, reviving the controversies that once divided the Liberals and cost them elections. 6. Abbott's personal life and priorities. After years out of office, Abbott has found new meaning in writing, mentoring, and public speaking. Returning to full-time politics would mean re-entering the grind of daily scrutiny, internal politics, and unrelenting pressure. Some close to him say that while Abbott still has passion for policy, he no longer has the appetite for political warfare. 7. The public appetite for change. Finally, the broader political climate favours new faces. Across the world, electorates are turning away from former leaders in search of fresh perspectives. A comeback could be seen not as revival, but as regression. Abbott would have to convince the Australian public that his leadership is not a return to the past, but a renewed vision for the future. The barriers are enormous, structural, ideological, and generational. Abbott might still hold the heart of Conservative Australia, but to return to office, He would need to bridge divides that no one has managed to heal in nearly a decade. And even for a political fighter like Tony Abbott, that might be his greatest challenge yet. Split screen of Abbott versus modern conservative leaders protest footage, social media comment visuals, and political news headlines, parliament sessions or Liberal Party meetings, animated graphics showing internal party division, subtle, dramatic lighting transitions to show barriers rising. Imagine this: the Australian political stage, nearly a decade after Tony Abbott's fall from power, suddenly flickers with whispers of a comeback. Not as a young rebel, not as the firebrand conservative from the 2010s, but as the seasoned statesman who believes history might just need him one more time. There are three main scenarios experts and political insiders discuss when they talk about a possible Abbott return. Scenario 1. The mentor behind the curtain. The first, and perhaps most realistic, scenario isn't about Tony Abbott storming Parliament with a fresh campaign. Instead, it's the image of a power broker, a kingmaker, operating behind the scenes. After years in political silence, Abbott still commands respect in the Liberal Party's right wing. He has former allies in Parliament, grassroots supporters in conservative think tanks, and loyal donors who once bankrolled his rise. In this vision, Abbott becomes a kind of political whisperer, shaping policy, influencing leadership choices, and providing strategic advice from outside formal politics. He doesn't need the title of Prime Minister anymore. He becomes the man behind the curtain, steering the ideological course of the party. Such a comeback could redefine how Australia sees political influence, showing that even without office, power can be exercised through persuasion, ideology, and legacy. Scenario 2. The Conservative revival candidate. Then there's the bolder fantasy: Tony Abbott himself stepping forward, saying that the nation has lost its way, and that is ready to save the Conservative vision. This would be the most dramatic version of his return. With the political right around the world experiencing waves of revival, from Donald Trump in the US to Nigel Farage in the UK, Abbott could ride a similar tide in Australia. He could position himself as the authentic Conservative voice, unafraid to challenge political correctness, bureaucracy, and environmental overreach. In this scenario, Abbott might run not through the Liberal Party, but outside of it, launching a breakaway Australian values movement or joining forces with smaller conservative coalitions. His campaign would focus on defending traditional family structures, restoring border control as a moral duty, rejecting what he calls woke economics, returning faith and patriotism to public life. It would be divisive, yes, but it could capture the emotions of a section of voters who feel politically abandoned. Scenario 3. The elder statesman reborn. And finally, the most subtle but perhaps most achievable route is Abbott's reinvention as an elder statesman. Instead of fighting elections, Abbott might rise as an international or moral voice for Australia. He could serve as an advisor, a commentator, or even a regional diplomat. He's already been active in conservative circles across Europe, and his strong views on security, defence, and immigration resonate with global right-wing movements. In this scenario, Abbott becomes a symbolic guardian of traditional Australian values, not by sitting in Parliament, but by influencing thought, shaping discourse, and reminding people of the old Australia he believes in. Such a version of Abbott could have lasting influence far beyond elections, a reminder that legacy doesn't always fade when the seat is gone. Implications for Australian politics and voters. If Tony Abbott were to return, in any of these forms, the ripple effects would shake Australian politics at its core. Because this wouldn't just be about one man. It would be about the kind of country Australia wants to be. Impact on the Liberal Party. For the Liberal Party, Abbott's re-emergence would be both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, he represents a clear identity: strong borders, lower taxes, faith in tradition, and skepticism toward globalism. In a world where mainstream parties struggle to define themselves, Abbott brings clarity. But on the other hand, he also brings division. The Liberal Party today has evolved, younger, more diverse, more urban. Abbott's hardline stances could alienate moderates, especially younger Australians and suburban voters who now lean independent. His return might revive old internal wars between the moderate and conservative factions, a battle that nearly tore the party apart in the mid-2010s. So while his supporters would see a hero returning, Others might see a ghost from the past reopening wounds the party worked hard to heal. Impact on Australian politics overall beyond party lines. Abbott's comeback could reshape national debate. His voice would reignite discussions about immigration limits and border control, the role of religion in politics, free speech versus hate speech, climate change policy, and Australia's identity in an increasingly multicultural world. For Conservatives, Abbott would be a rallying figure, proof that traditional values can still challenge progressive dominance. For Progressives, he would become a symbol of resistance, a reminder that the political pendulum never stops swinging. The media landscape, too, would be reshaped. Talk shows, debates, and political commentary would orbit around Abbott's influence, turning every speech or interview into a national headline. In short, Abbott's return, even hypothetical, could repolarize the nation, forcing Australians to once again confront their political identity. Impact on the voters. For the public, especially younger voters, Abbott's comeback could feel like déjà vu. They grew up during his tenure, with heated debates on same-sex marriage, climate action, and national security. But for older and rural voters, Abbott might represent stability and nostalgia, a return to a time when politics felt simpler and values felt firm. The real question would be, does modern Australia still have space for old-school politics? Would voters choose experience over innovation? Or has the future already moved on without Abbott's kind of leaders? Will he return? And should he? Let's face it, Tony Abbott's name still stirs strong emotions. To some, he's the guardian of conservative Australia. To others, he's the symbol of an outdated era. So, will he actually return? The honest answer, maybe not in the way people imagine. Abbott himself has often hinted that his days as a frontline politician are behind him. But if there's one thing politics teaches us, it's that no figure ever truly disappears, especially those with unfinished business. He may not walk back into Parliament. He may never again lead a government. But through speeches, alliances, and media, Abbott could easily reinsert himself into the national conversation. And should he? That's the more complex question. For some Australians, Abbott's return could restore clarity, a voice that refuses to bend to populism or global trends. For others, it would risk dragging Australia backward, reopening wounds in an already polarised society. Yet, even without returning, his presence hovers, in debates, in ideology, in every argument about who defines Australia's true identity. In the end, whether Tony Abbott returns or not, the fact that we are even asking the question says something powerful. Australia is still searching for balance, between tradition and progress, between loyalty and change. And maybe, just maybe, that's the real legacy of Tony Abbott, not just what he did while in power, but the way his shadow still shapes the country's politics long after he left office.